Hello, my name is Brandon Booth. I'm a freshman at Bloomsburg University studying political science, and today we're going to talk about the international nuclear arms race. Throughout this video, I'm going to lay out the basics of what this is, the major players in this race, why this is all important, and then lastly, I'm going to talk about why international relations is just so important to everything we talked about. So first thing first, a little bit of an introduction. The nuclear arms race refers to the modern-day increase in nuclear arsenals all across the world and the competition to become a major nuclear player. This is specifically in a few major countries, specifically 9 countries, which possess 12,100 nuclear warheads as of early 2024, with many of them increasing. But throughout this presentation, we're going to talk about 3 major players: Russia, the United States, and China. I'm going to go through and lay out each of these countries' current nuclear programs. I'm going to talk about how 2 of the 3 of them are increasing, while 1 of them isn't, but why it's still important. I'm going to talk about why it is important, just in general, that all of these nuclear arsenals are increasing and as large as they are. And then, as I said, I'm going to lay out why international relations is so important to this and how it can be used to either solve this conflict peacefully or violently. So first we're going to talk about Russia. Russia is the #1 nuclear power in the world, meaning that they have the most nuclear weapons with 5,580 nuclear warheads, according to the Federation of American Scientists. With having all these nuclear weapons, the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review also found that they were actively expanding their nuclear arsenal to make it larger and have more weapons. This is important because Russia is seen as an adversary of the United States, but an ally of China. But also, Russia has conflicts with many different NATO countries and is currently going through a war with Ukraine. With all this being said, having as much nuclear power as they do is obviously very consequential for the entire world. Next, we're going to talk about the United States. So the United States is the #2 nuclear power in the world, with 5,044 nuclear warheads, according to the Federation of American Scientists. This comes after the United States was the former nuclear leader of the world and is the only country to use nuclear weapons as they did, or use nuclear weapons for warfare purposes, as they did in World War II against Japan. The United States obviously aligning themselves with these Western ideals, aligning themselves with the rest of NATO, and being one of the biggest adversaries of both Russia and China, the 2 other countries we're talking about today. It's also obviously very consequential why they could have weapons that powerful. The only thing is the United States nuclear arsenal is decreasing, unlike the other 2, but it is decreasing very slowly as they are still trying to make sure that they have a leg up on China whenever it comes to nuclear weapons. This also comes as there's concerns over Russia's nuclear arsenal and how effective it really could be, as many of the nuclear weapons are either inactive or outdated. With that being said, the United States is still basically up there with Russia as such a big nuclear power and is still maintaining this idea of mutually assured destruction, which we'll touch a little bit on later. So next we're going to talk about China. China is the #3 nuclear power, right? But obviously behind Russia and the United States, with approximately 500 nuclear warheads as estimated by the Federation of American Scientists. But the Lowy Institute found that they were increasing rapidly. China is trying to catch up with the other 2 major nuclear powers to become one of the biggest nuclear powers themselves. They're already #3, but they have ambitions of becoming #2 or maybe even #1. As they continue to increase their entire military, but specifically talking here about their nuclear weapons. So all this said, why is this so important? Well, it's so important due to the complex and dangerous nature of nuclear weapons. These increases in nuclear weapons and the attempt to fight for these top spots is just a sign of heightening tensions, which we've seen already between the United States and these 2 countries, which it holds to be its adversaries. The United States is trying not to let Russia get a leg up on it with nuclear weapons, while also trying to make sure that Russia is not too ahead of it with nuclear weapons, while China is trying to increase to be able to compete. This is creating an idea called mutually assured destruction. Mutually assured destruction is a theory saying that if we have a large amount of nuclear weapons, Russia has a large amount of nuclear weapons, China, or any country, it doesn't really matter for that. With all of these countries having as many weapons as they do, they are basically guaranteeing that they could destroy each other. Having thousands of nuclear weapons as they do now is assuring that each of these countries, if gone to nuclear war with each other could destroy each other, and all of these nuclear weapons could actually destroy the entire world multiple times over, which would obviously lead to the death of civilization. But even if not used all the way, this could lead to so many deaths as these weapons are so powerful. With all this being said, it's obviously very, very important. So that brings me to the last part, and perhaps the most important part of this entire presentation, which is international relations. International relations decides what's next for this conflict. International relations will decide if we engage in a nuclear war like I talked about earlier, or if we're able to solve these problems diplomatically. One thing I want to talk about whenever it comes to solving diplomatically is the Iranian nuclear deal, a deal between Iran and the United States, where the U.S. was starting to get worried about Iran's nuclear arsenal. So they actually made a diplomatic deal and were able to come to terms saying that the United States would remove some sanctions against Iran. And in exchange, Iran had to agree to some regulations on their nuclear arsenal. But international relations can also, if done incorrectly, could also lead to warfare. If the US, China, Russia, and other countries, as they start to increase their nuclear arsenals, cannot come together and make these kind of diplomatic deals, maybe even through deals like this, or through international organizations like the United Nations, are not able to find peaceful ways, we will be engaging in this kind of warfare, which I talked about earlier, which is obviously less than ideal. With all of this being said, this is a real problem. The increase in nuclear arms, or the nuclear weapons arms race, is obviously so important, as I've laid out here. Russia, China, and the United States are all engaging in these large nuclear arsenals, with two of the three actively increasing, while one is very slightly decreasing, but mostly remaining stagnant, all competing to be the number one or number two spot whenever it comes to nuclear weapons. With all of this being said, it's obviously very important, and it needs to be solved in a relatively peaceful and smart manner.